Welcome everyone to the third episode of SecureDApp's X-clusive, a groundbreaking 6-week Web3 innovation series. I'm Karan, your host for today, and I'm thrilled to have you all joining us for this live webinar. Whether you are tuning in from India or around the globe, thank you for being part of our mission to illuminate the blockchain landscape. Today, we have got an incredible session lined up. We'll dive into a timely and important topic and answer your burning questions. So stick around, participate, and make this a fantastic experience. For those who don't know me, I'm Karan Sontake, Assistant Manager Business Development and Growth at SecureDApp. I'm an engineer and an MBA as well. My passion is bridging the gap between cutting edge security solutions and the Web3 community. I'm excited to bring you insights from today's session. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed guest for today. We are incredibly fortunate to have with us Jay Smith. Jay is the chairperson of Accumulate Governance Committee at Accumulate Foundation. As the chairman of the Accumulate Governance Committee and president of both IDD Labs and Genalt, Jay's work is centered on a single goal: creating robust, secure, and scalable decentralized systems. Welcome, Jay. Nice to have you.
Nice to be here. Looking
Yeah,
forward to it.
yeah. Thanks for joining also, Jay. The topic of today's webinar is Accumulate Network, the future of digital identity and asset management. Let's dive right into our discussion. So let's get started, Jay.
Okay,
Yeah.
ready to go.
So Jay, talking about your professional journey is fascinating. Could you please briefly walk us through your career path and how you came to be involved with the Accumulate network?
Well, sure. So, like you and probably a lot of our community, I started out as a technical person. Spent a lot of years doing programming. Uh, I spent great the great deal of my beginning career building big financial systems. So it's given me kind of an interesting perspective because I've spent years building um, like I've worked on the payment engine at Citi and collateral management systems and all those big financial systems that we're going to have to at some point in the crypto world start interacting with. And then in 2018, an old startup buddy of mine called and said, I've got another startup. And being a slow learner, I said, sure, let's do a startup again. And so I ended up with Paul Snow, who had he'd worked on Ethereum. You can see he's one of the contributors there, but he'd created this thing called Factum, a blockchain. And that's where I got started. And then in 2022, we did a hard fork and an upgrade of Factum to accumulate. And that's where I'm at now and having a great time.
Yeah, it looks really exciting. So Jay, talking about Accumulate, uh, can you tell us, like when we talk about blockchain, we hear a lot about blockchain-based identity solutions. What exactly do we mean by that?
Well, I think the what do we mean by that gets defined quite a bit by the we in because there's a lot of definitions of identity solutions in general. What we mean is that we build within the blockchain, and in fact, we organize around the blockchain digital identities, which in our case are the ability to cryptographically manage a set of resources and data and be able to cryptographically prove. We take a very low level view of digital identity, and we don't, which allows us to support any of the digital identity standards. Uh, and so but we provide the underlying backbone that other projects can use.
Right. So, Jay, so with that in mind, what is Accumulate Network and how does it set itself apart from other blockchain identity solutions out there?
Well, accumulate is something of an odd duck, and for very good reasons. Back, like I said a minute ago, Paul Snow, who created this, when he was working on the Ethereum project, he had something of an aha moment when he realized that Ethereum, like most new things, was taking a lot of shortcuts, which is not a bad thing. Most new things do. The biggest being that they were smashing the data layer and the application layer together, which was ultimately going to create a lot of barriers and that of what the project could do. And as a result, he ended up creating Factum that became Accumulate. And what we are is we're not a store value like Bitcoin or any of those chains, and we're not a smart contract platform like Ethereum. We're a third kind of blockchain that our purpose is to organize data and authority around identities. And the idea being that we provide a blockchain-based data layer that can work with other projects to allow those projects to do a lot of things that they can't do, or at least it's very difficult or very expensive or very risky to do by themselves. And so we're something unique. I mean, earlier before we started, you'd asked about what smart contract language we use, but we don't because we're the data layer. We expect the smart contract platform we work with to be the application layer.
Got it, got it. That's an interesting concept. Also, talking about digital identity, it's also an equally interesting concept. Digital identity in the context of asset management, how does Accumulate define it?
Again, Accumulate, we provide the backbone. So various the asset management standards have definitions of how they manage digital identity. And it's very important in asset management because it's particularly if you're talking about private asset management or real world asset management, what the technology, what we're trying to do there is take the regulations and the rules that these fall under and implement those rules in the blockchain so that the blockchain is enforcing them so that there doesn't have to be a third party, but that it can be distributed and autonomous. Uh, and what we provide in those cases is the data layer that, for example, if you look at something like the tokeny solution or many of the solutions, the the digital identity portion of it, even though the token portion is running on the blockchain is decentralized, the digital identity portion, if you look under the covers, what's actually happening is it's running on centralized database servers and providing and often providing a way for them to make money, a place to bend rent, where we provide the opportunity to make it truly decentralized and work with those standards. And the other thing with real world assets or with digitation of assets at all, like I said, we work as a data layer. And so one of the big problems we solve is if you digitize an asset, because the data that defines the token, and the token is a smart contract, that data is inside the smart contract. So you can only have that token in one place at a time. And generally, the whole purpose to tokenization is to increase liquidity, to be able to more easily expose yourself to as many investors as possible. But the technology right now, and one of the reasons it hasn't grown, is limits you because you can only put your token on one marketplace and where one set of investors are, or a different marketplace, but not both. But using Accumulate, you can move the data down into a data object, and identities down into identities on accumulate that then can be pointed to by many instances of the smart contract, because the data is no longer inside the smart contract. So all of a sudden, you can have your token on three different marketplaces on Ethereum, four marketplaces on Polygon, a marketplace on Avalanche, all simultaneously, and really truly get what we're trying to get, which is to increase the liquidity of the asset by exposing it to as many investors as possible. Wow, that was probably way bigger an answer than you were looking for.
No, no, no. Like it was quite comprehensive for us to learn about accumulate network. So no worries about that. Yeah, and let's talk about decentralized frameworks. So there seems to be a growing need for these decentralized frameworks. Why do you think that's the case today?
Well, a lot of times everything kind of rolls back to money, and that's certainly a place to start here, because one of the great things about decentralization, one of the reasons I get excited about it, and I suspect a lot of our audience gets excited about it, is it offers the opportunity to peel out all of the rent takers, the all of the parties that are involved in transactions and that we do every day, um, that there's centralized people that are taking a piece of the pie all the time. And we're discovering more and more business cases where it makes sense to truly decentralize it. And we need the frameworks like some of the things we're building on Accumulate. And some of the frameworks I know your all's DApp framework around security. I mean, these are the pieces, the building blocks that's building the decentralized world and the possibility of building decentralized worlds and decentralized applications that will reduce the cost and make things more available, because there's not the central parties that are either deciding how it should be done or making it more expensive. So I'm really excited about some of the decentralized frameworks that I'm seeing coming out.
Yeah, we are equally excited. And can you tell us what are the key problems in traditional identity and asset management that Accumulate is aiming to solve?
Sure. So, and I kind of touched on this a minute ago, on identity. Um, One of the problems that you have is that in many cases, much of the identity information really can't be publicly available, uh, which is a problem for a lot of blockchains. But Accumulate, because we are organized around identities, and identities can hold identities, and that makes us hierarchical, and because of some of the ways we've handled security, um, in Accumulate, you can have subnets of the blockchain that are private and permissioned, um, but those subnets are still anchored in the public blockchain. And the result is, um, I I can set up a private permission section of my blockchain that's holding identity data that needs to be private, but when I'm dealing with a party where I need to prove that data, I can still cryptographically prove the data. So that kind of gives you the best of both worlds in terms of a private blockchain or a public blockchain, or a private blockchain with some sort of centralized thing about behind it. Again, it's kind of the framework, and we were talking about framework a second ago, but it's one of the framework pieces that allows us to build the decentralized, um, truly decentralize many of the applications that have been difficult because they straddle this public and private data chasm that we address.
Right, right. Just a follow-up question. This must be involving ZK proofs as well, means I guess.
Well, it can, but we don't depend on those. In that, a lot of blockchain solutions, you've got You're getting around, for example, the volume of transactions or um, with ZK rollups. And you can use ZK rollups at any point with our data. I mean, what you're keeping in Accumulate is basically data, and we make it really easy to keep data, and you can roll that up. But for example, in our private subnets, they don't have to be ZK. They can if it helps you, or if you just want to deal with the data straight without doing rollups, you can do that as well.
Right.
We're pretty flexible.
Right, right. Got it, got it. So let's talk about the tech more. How does accumulates layered key management system make digital identity so much more secure?
Yeah, that's one of the places where we really shine. And one of the places where when we were designing Accumulate, we started from scratch. We didn't start with, Ethereum and add something or start with Bitcoin and add something. We took a blank sheet of paper, um, and looked at the problems we were trying to solve and then designed something to solve those problems. And whereas most blockchains, your security is tied to your addressings. Um, your security is a private key, and the private key is mathematically connected to your account address,
Right,
and you can't change them. And we have split the security and addressing completely apart. So our identities and the accounts under our identities are controlled by authorities, and the authorities are configurable. And so basically, um, um, you've got number one, you've got multi-sig, but it's nearly infinitely configurable multi-sig, um, and um, the keys can be changed. So, for example, I can set up an account that just requires a single key, in which case it's just like Bitcoin or Ethereum, except I can change the key later if I need to. I can set up an account that requires, for example, um, that one of seven employees sign it and one of three managers. And then later I can say, oh, this account, I really want this um, risk management AI that I've engaged to sign off on every transaction. So I can then add that the risk management AI has to sign off. And I can change my mind later. And if an employee quits, I can just pull their key and drop the new employee's key in. Um, and and one of the really exciting things we have going on right now is we have an L2 project that's being built on top of Accumulate, certain that will take this capability to have nearly infinitely flexible um, multi-sig and make it available layered across every other blockchain. So I'll be able to sit here with a platform and define whatever multi-sig I want across my Ethereum accounts and my Polygon accounts and even my UTXO accounts like Bitcoin. And it'll all work the same. And the security for those other accounts, instead of being written in smart contracts, not the safest way to do things, that multi-sig security will be executed at the core of a blockchain designed to do it. So, yeah, this key management, and that's one of the things we say, our core thing that we do is we organize data and authorities, and it's the key management is the authorities that we organize around uh, digital identities.
right. So, really seems a lot of work building this. Can you tell a bit about your team as well, the Accumulate Network team behind this, the exceptional work that they are doing?
Yeah, we have about six people that are part of the core team, and then there's a lot of volunteers. We're like most blockchains. We are a fully distributed. We're open source. We have contributors all over the world that are building things into this. Um, we back in 2021, we raised about $4.5 million to do the complete rewrite of Factum into Accumulate. And we've been launched since 2022. Um, and we have a really dedicated team because we know we've built something that's it's not just another clone of Ethereum with some glitter added in, but something that is really truly unique and um, is going to allow the industry to do things it can't do right now, or they think they can't do. They just need to learn about us.
Right. So, Jay, the chain of chains architecture sounds unique. So, how does it improve both scalability as well as interoperability?
As I talked about a little while ago, the fact that when you look at Accumulate, instead of seeing, like, if you look at Ethereum or any of the clones or Bitcoin, you see just one long row of accounts, basically a long row of lockers that are randomly assigned. Accumulate, since we're not organized around accounts, we're organized around identities. When you look in the blockchain, you see a row of identities, except if you look at an identity, you can see another row of identities inside that identity, and you can see identities inside of those identities. And so you end up with a hierarchy of a chain, like a tree. And you can treat different parts of the tree differently, um, which is um, gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of setting a subnet of the tree to deal better with another blockchain, or a subnet of the tree to deal with centralized systems, and a subnet of the tree to be private and permissioned, and another subset of the tree to be a different private and uh, uh, permissioned. And this allows us to create very flexible models when working with other blockchains. Um, and we and the thing I was talking about before, what that Certain is doing to tie to other blockchains, also allows us to um, uh, get rid of bridging. For the most part, you really don't need it. So yeah, our model of being um, chains under chains allows us to do a lot of things around connecting things together, but still maintaining the cryptographic um, security from end to end.
Right, got it. I would also urge our audience to start posting their questions that we'll take at the end of the session, and continuing with our discussion, Jay. Uh, so it seems like a tough balance, but how does Accumulate ensure that a digital identity is both tamper proof as well as flexible enough for future use?
Well, because, and as I said a little while ago, we look at digital identity at the very lowest level, which is just basically um, tying your cryptographically tying a identity. You can almost think of it as a label to a set of resources and a set of data and a set of authorities. Um, and because we're data focused, this means we're nearly infinitely flexible. So we don't define what your digital identity model is. So we can be W3C DID. We can be basically, you pick your identity model that you want to use, and we can support it. But what then we do for security is that we make sure that all of the, we're a blockchain, and all of the data that defines the identity, the changes to the security of the identity, everything is written to the blockchain, obviously immutable, and so you end up with a immutable audit trail of every step of the way of the identity. Even if your identity needs to be private, you can do that in a way that you still got the cryptographic proof of every step that you can present to someone outside of your private enclave. And so we just give nearly infinite flexibility to how you deal with your identity from the application point of view, while making sure that everything is rock solid and secure underneath.
Right, got it. So let's talk about the practical use cases more. How could accumulate be applied in financial services for things like KYC, compliance, and cross-border transactions?
Well, because we provide an identity service, then there's a number of groups like Operate Crypto has just launched um, KYC services on top of Accumulate, where they're taking advantage of the Accumulate identity services, along with the really powerful multi-sig capabilities to create really flexible KYC identity solutions. Um, and we also, one of the things that comes up in cross-border is you have a lot of cases where pieces of your transaction, um, there are country level regulations that certain portions of the data, cannot leave the country. We were doing a project with the Gates Foundation a number of years ago to build medical wallets. In this case, we were doing the prototype in South Africa. And South Africa at the time, and they probably still do, had regulations in place that medical data, the data about a person, could not leave South Africa, which is problematic for most public blockchains because the data gets replicated everywhere. But this wasn't a problem for us, even though we're public, because we could define a subnet in South Africa that all of the validator servers for that subnet were in South Africa, and the data never left South Africa, even though it was part of the worldwide blockchain. And the um, there's a lot of cases where you've got cross-border problems like that, where if you were building an application using any of the smart contract platforms, you could continue to use the smart contract platform exactly as you have, but move some of the data down into Accumulate and use it to be able to meet those regulatory hurdles.
Right, right. So what kind of partnerships or collaborations do you think would really help accumulate gain traction?
Um, well, the two that I know that we're doing right now, L2s are turning out to be pretty exciting because there's some cool things you can do on top of Accumulate. Like I said, we've got one certain that's doing the ability to do the multi-sig across any assets. We've got another group that's doing an L2 that's going to take advantage of our identity and security to organize and secure um, AI platforms so that it's kind of like know your agent. Um, if you're using a AI and that AI is making important decisions that may be worth millions of dollars, um, you want to make sure when you deploy the AI that's making the decisions for you is actually the AI that you intended, um, and wrapping those within a blockchain-based identity solves that problem. Um, and we are looking for some partners to do some interesting things about with NFTs because um, because we are hierarchical, and because we can set up layers of this very complex, well, not, I shouldn't say complex, very capable um, uh, multi-sig, you can do there's opportunities to do things like NFTs that have components within them. So you could have an NFT that is maybe a sports club NFT that the sports club could then lease to or rent to a fan, and we can do that because we've got this cool multi-sig stuff. And then there could be subcomponents of the NFT that the fan could actually put fan art or fan material into. So there's some really cool things that could be done that we'd love to work with some smart contract based NFT players to build competitive advantages for their platform.
Right. So, talking about NFTs, uh, so what role do you see Accumulate playing in the exciting world of Web3 with things like NFTs, DAOs, and tokenized assets?
Oh, DAOs, that's something we hadn't talked about, and that's really good point. One of the problems that DAOs have that it's been a consistent problem with DAOs, is on-chain governance. It's difficult because on-chain governance really gets back to you need very powerful multi-sig, and it turns out multi-sig just the act of writing the code to implement multisig is complex. It's complex code, which makes it hard to implement in smart contracts. Which is why if you look at the multisig solutions, like Safe Wallet they're very limited in terms of what they can do, without having to go write more smart contract code. Accumulate can work with DAOs to provide governance, uh, like we do the governance for Accumulate within Accumulate, and it's very nice because I can set up, for example, so that the either half the worldwide operators have to approve something, or a majority of the governance committee, or this, and then I can add ands to that. And all of this is parameterized. It's just dropping keys into keybooks so you don't have to write mounds of code. So you can do, I challenge anyone to come up with a governance scheme that I can't implement in probably 5 minutes. And this would be and because we work with smart contract platforms, anybody doing a DAO that has been, beating their head against how to do governance, reach out to us because, again, we're not here to replace your smart contract platform, but we're here to help you do more, to make your platform more competitive and to add competitive advantages for you.
Right. Seems like we have got the highlight of the session right there. The material that we put on shorts. So really
Yeah.
nice caption we can like put for this. And how can a large enterprise use Accumulate to manage the ownership of both digital and physical assets at the same time? Can you please explain that?
Sure. And right now is a really interesting time because, with some of the changing regulation, large financial enterprises are starting to move into and deal with uh, digital assets. And it's interesting for them because they have standard financial controls, and that are, in some cases they're best practice, but in many cases they're regulatorily required to do things like separation of responsibilities and make sure that the same person can't create a transaction who can authorize the transaction. They have to have these very sophisticated financial controls. And so if an organization is sitting there, for example, doing custody of Bitcoin for a client with a single private key, that's really hard. Um, you just basically can't. So they have to wrap it in some um, multi-sig solution. But the multi-sig solutions on the market right now are all smart contract based. They're, things like safe, not so safe, um, and they have a lot of security problems. And if your audience probably saw, not very long ago, about 6, 7 weeks ago, one of the exchanges had a 1.4 billion, that's with a B, billion-dollar hack, that was a result of the insecurities that having smart contract based multi-sig uh, introduce into the mix. And so our our key management and the ability to wrap that around other assets on other platforms, um, and by doing that, moving all of that security, the the signature management uh, into the core of a blockchain that was designed to do that, working in parallel again with whatever smart contract platform. I mean, this is I really believe this is one of the places where um, we're going to really start to shine because it's the kind of problems that Accumulate was specifically designed to address.
Right. So in that particular hack, people were saying that the people were hacked basically. So
Well,
accumulate network can help prevent that using this particular.
yes, because it actually what happened is the multi-sig solutions that are on the market now, when you the creation of the transaction and the signing of the transaction, let's say I want to create a transaction to move assets from account A to account B. Well, I would create the transaction externally as a file, really. And then I need to pass that file to the other people that need to sign it. All of this is external to the blockchain. And what happened on that big hack is that the the program that they used to do that, creating the transaction and passing around, it got hacked. And so now the transaction that was actually being signed and the transaction that the employees were seeing were two different transactions. And in Accumulate, the transaction would be created inside the blockchain. And then the transaction would be signed inside the blockchain. And then the transaction would be handed from employee to employee inside the blockchain. Those employees would sign it inside the blockchain, and there's none of this external attack surface that is the source of so much mischief. And so we eliminate, in this case, the where somebody was able to get into that app through some people hacking, that surface, that attack surface just wouldn't exist.
Right, right. Got it. Really great insight into that particular incident, Jay. So, so can you also tell us for the individual what opportunities does accumulate create for them to be truly control and even monetize their digital identities?
Um, well, we've got there's a group, Operate Crypto, that's one of our ecosystem partners. They're using Accumulate to build some truly Web3 solutions that allow you to create identities and create um, accounts and create web presences that are all blockchain based that use the security features of Accumulate so that I can, for example, create a web page that gives people information about me that I can control how that goes. And instead of just giving my information to centralized players, it starts to build the basic fundamental building blocks to build these sort of Web3 things where now you're in control of your data and you have your identity. You can authorize people to use it if they're willing to pay for your data. So we're seeing a lot of exciting things going on there. I shall or recommend the audience go look at Operate Crypto. They're a good example, and I'm sure there's much more to come.
Right. So talking a bit more about interoperability, so how does Accumulate Network manage to balance its focus on interoperability with the strict compliance requirements we see from regulators and governments?
Um, and most of this and we've talked about it a little bit before, is the ability to handle the kind of governance. Because most, when you're talking about the regulatory requirements, most of them fall under the heading of governance, governance of who has access, governance over who can make changes, governance over who can own an asset, or who an asset can be transferred to, who information can be transferred to. And because we are at the heart at, I mean, we're organized. We're just a big pile of identities, or a big pile that's very well organized, but a big pile of identities with powerful security wrapped around those identities. We provide the tools for all the other blockchains to build the kind of compliance things that are required by government. In a good case outside the financial realm, we have a client, a partner that's building a supply chain application on top of us. And they're doing it because they can build parts of the supply chain app behind closed doors as a private subnet, um, because there's parties in the supply chain network that their value is their Rolodex, and so they don't want their Rolodex on a public chain. But at the same time, even though it's protecting them, which makes those parties willing to work on this um, chain, at the same time, the data can be cryptographically proven to the regulatory parties that are involved. And so it's actually kind of exciting because this solves a problem that not very long ago, IBM and Maersk, the Maersk is the largest player in the supply chain industry. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars to build a blockchain supply chain thing, trade lens, which ended up being an abject failure. They finally just gave up after spending hundreds of millions of dollars. And the reason is this lack, they didn't have this ability to create the private sections of the blockchain. And so we're excited about what can go on there.
Right. We are equally excited. And talking about the future and the vision, so looking ahead, what role does Accumulate envision for itself in shaping the future of global digital identity standards?
Well, I think accumulate. I'm hoping, and we're certainly building it to be this, to become kind of the identity and data under things backbone uh, behind much of what's going on to build. Um, um, right now, when you build things on blockchains, when you build things with smart contract platforms, you are limited to composition. You can only build by building programs bigger and bigger. Uh, and by leveraging Accumulate as the underlying identities and the underlying blockchain-based data items, you can build using orchestration, where instead of building bigger and bigger programs that are harder and harder to test, you can build lots of mini small smart contracts that are easy to test, that can work together and that can work with these identities to build far more complex solutions than are possible to build now, because it just becomes too unwieldy and difficult to test. Um, and get back to kind of the engineering best practice of building systems in layers where I have an application layer and a data layer. And so and right now I think is the time where this is going to start becoming really important, this ability to build these high risk systems, but build it in a safe and better, more engineer compliant path. Um, so this is going to be exciting times.
Right. And talking about TradeFi and DeFi, so how can Accumulate help bridge the gap between traditional finance, that is TradFi, and the world of decentralized finance, that is DeFi?
Well, that, one of the problems of bridging the gap, is this fact that there are parts of the TradFi world that have these regulatory requirements around where the data can be, who can see the data, and that sort of thing. And these are the kinds of things we're talking about that with our ability to create private subnets, we solve those sorts of problems. With our ability to create blockchain-based identities, we can potentially get rid of many of the uh, centralized databases that are behind many of the existing systems. And probably most important is our really flexible and really um, uh, uh, powerful multi-sig system. We allow the governance that's required because again, when we're talking about the regulations, most of the time it's just really it boils down to governance. And the reason that um, digital and distributed systems have had so much trouble tying with TradFi is a single private key just won't cut it. And you've got to have the kind of flexible multi-sig capabilities that we provide so that you can build an Ethereum smart contract based system, but have the kind of multi-key that you need.
Right. So, as the network grows, what challenges might arise in scaling Accumulate to be a global identity and asset management layer? Can you please tell about that?
Well, one of the advantages we have there, is because we started from scratch. We took some different design choices, and so most blockchains, like Ethereum and all of its clones, and Bitcoin and all of its clones, um, are set up in such a way that there's really only one server of all the miners or of all the validators that's doing um, the next block. It's randomly assigned, but there's still only one, and then everybody else validates it uh, to meet consensus. Accumulate is set up so that um, our consensus happens at the center, but validation happens out at the leaves at the individual validators, which means that as we add servers, our processing capabilities um, um, improve. Basically, if you double the number of validators on the Accumulate network, the capacity of the network approximately doubles. Whereas if I doubled the number of validators on the Ethereum network, and the network throughput wouldn't change. And this is the way it is with most networks. And this is because underneath we are also a chain of change. Is there chains of validators that are working together to process the transactions so that we can work. Accumulate actually works in parallel. So, and we did this very deliberately because since we meant to be the underlying data layer of all the other blockchains, we need to be able to scale. And it's one of the reasons why we're not a smart contract platform, because smart contracts implementing that makes it very hard to do what we do, which is have this linear scalability. But we could lend this linear scalability to the smart contract chains that we work with. is that we give them the ability to handle higher transaction rates than they could by themselves.
Right, right. So, this is the final question before we open up to the audience. So,
Okay.
Jay, what kind of impact could accumulate have on individuals and emerging economies who may not have access to traditional banking systems?
Well, I think that um, accumulate, well, number one, we have very low fees. And so, and in fact, our fees are fixed because we use a two token system. But the cost of a transaction today, the same transaction will cost the same tomorrow and a year from now, um, which makes which for the developed world building applications for use in those worlds. Um, in our world, the fact that when we build an app, a solution, and then but we can't really depend on the financial model. A transaction might cost 2 cents today and $3 tomorrow. That doesn't work in third world. And so Accumulate offers the opportunity to build solutions that have a fixed cost and the financial model is known in advance and can be depended on. Um, and I think this has a lot of possibilities for the less developed world.
Yeah, sure it does. So let's now move on to our audience question and answers, Jay. And we have received many excellent questions from our viewers. One common question first up is these words identity, privacy. So are these like contradictory to what blockchain was built? Like it was mainly about transparency and making data public, like it is accessible to everyone. Isn't this a bit contradictory?
It is in some cases, but um, you know, I would love the world to be the ideal place that we would all like it to be, but the reality is that there are regulations, and there are business drivers that sometimes require parts of the data involved in something to be private, or at least to be private, except for those that need to see it. And the way I think of it is, those requirements are not going to go away. And so our choice is, do we want to be pure and I'll only do this on a totally public blockchain, or do we want to be practical where, okay, I'll do everything I can on a public blockchain and I'll do the parts that for regulatory reasons can't be on a public blockchain on a subnet of something that's cryptographically tied to a public blockchain, where this means that the parties involved cannot lie. And I think this is a really important point. And a lot of times, um, the solution to this right now is, well, let's just use a private blockchain, which is great. That means the parties involved in that private blockchain can't lie to each other, but they can still lie to the rest of the world, which, the banking community can set up their own consortiums and they're all, cryptographically bound to each other and know they're telling the truth, but they can lie to anybody outside that group. And what we offer is the opportunity to they can still set up their consortium, uh, but whenever they're passing data from inside their consortium to outside their consortium, I can demand that they provide me the proof that this is true, and I can cryptographically check that data and make sure that they're not lying to me. And I'm not seeing anything else that I don't need to see, but the things that I need to see for this transaction, I can demand proof. I can demand truth, and truth is disrupting. So I don't have a lot of heartburn over the fact that we're allowing what is, you know, considered bad because we're forcing truth there anyway.
Right. So let's move on to the next question. So this question, is related to another question that I had received from audience. So let's take this. Can accumulate work with big blockchains like Ethereum or Bitcoin? And let me take the other question as well that I'm talking about. How does accumulate interoperate with existing blockchain networks like Ethereum, Bitcoin, or Cosmos? So can you tell a bit about
Oh
this?
yeah, one of my favorite topics. Yes, absolutely. We work, and in fact, that's our entire reason for existence. Um, and so and one of the good examples is what I just talked about, the layer two that Certain is building that allows using Accumulate. We add multisig to the accounts of Ethereum and Bitcoin and Litecoin and Polygon, every other chain. Um, and I was talking about with um, like real world assets, um, using using if I were building real world assets and launching those tokens on Ethereum or on Polygon, I can use Accumulate to be the data layer underneath that. The all of the code that implements the regulations is still running in the smart contracts on Ethereum, but the data that defines this particular token would be down on the accumulate data blockchain layer, um, which which means, for example, if I want to have an asset on Ethereum and then I want to move it to Polygon, right now I would have to use a bridge, and bridges are dangerous. The only reason for a bridge is the fact that the data is inside the smart contract. We changed that paradigm so that the data is there's a central data object. And so you get rid of the need for bridges. Instead of bridging, I just instantiate uh, uh, a copy of the smart contract that's pointed to the central data object on another chain. No bridge involved, no bridge risk. It is the funny thing is, this is like computer science 101. It's every time there's a new technology like smart contracts, um, we in the computer science industry has have had a habit of forgetting everything we've learned over the last 80 years in terms of engineering best practices, and then we slowly have to get back to there with the shiny new technology. And that's what we're trying to do with Accumulate and smart contract platforms is get back to the engineering best practice of building in layers.
Right, back to basics, as they say. So
Yeah,
yeah, so another question, could you explain accumulate in simple words what it is doing? Like basically an audience member who might have joined late, it must be asking this.
sure. So Accumulate is a blockchain that organizes um, data and authorities like signature sets around identities. We're identity based, and our purpose in life is not to be a replacement for Ethereum or any other blockchain, but to rather to provide a data layer, a blockchain-based data layer that those other platforms like Ethereum, Polygon, Avalanche, Solana, any of them can work with to do more, to create asset tokens that can exist in more than one place, to provide multi-sig capabilities for Ethereum, uh, to just do a myriad of things that they can't do by themselves. There are my kind of favorite tagline is work with Accumulate, do more.
Right. So another question that I had received, what kind of safeguards are in place to prevent misuse or identity theft on the accumulate network?
Well, it is a blockchain, number one. Number two, all of the identities are secured by the key management, and you can make the key governance as complex as you want. You can make it so, define an identity so that 7 out of 10 people have to sign off of it, plus 2 out of 3 managers over there, and at least one of the board members has to sign off on any change of identity. Um, but mostly the level of security of an identity is defined by the implementation. Like for example, the W3C DIDs. They have um, uh, security defined in certain ways, and we support that. We support basically whatever security um, that the underlying spec provides, and we just make sure it's all bound down on a blockchain and behind a wall of multi-sig security.
Right. So I have many questions, but I'll just take one of them, the final one. If millions of people start using Accumulate Network, what's the biggest challenge in scaling it?
Um, I think probably the only challenge we would really have on scaling it is recruiting more validators. Um, and that's really not too much of a challenge because our validators don't require the huge compute. They don't require uh, the ASIC processors or anything like that. So our validators are relatively cheap to put up, and so I'm looking forward to more, wider and wider use because I don't think we're going to have much challenge in scaling.
Right.
We were interestingly enough, just a final little thing. Most of the blockchains in the world uh, they have discussions going on how they're going to shard, which is one of the primary scaling approaches. Ethereum has for years been talking about how they're going to shard the blockchain. Accumulate, every identity in Accumulate is its own blockchain. And so we are by design naturally sharded and nearly infinitely sharded. So scaling is just not an issue.
Yeah. Just a quick follow-up question. Can you please explain to our audience what does sharded or sharding means?
Oh, yeah, I guess that would make sense. Um, in most blockchains, you've just basically got everything is in one box, and all of the miners or all of the processors have to deal with that everything. And what sharding does is allows you to divide up, for example, the accounts or the identities within the blockchain. So one set of like for example, in Ethereum, one set of the miners in Ethereum would be worried about this portion of the total Ethereum world, and another set of miners would be worried about this portion, and so on, and which would allow you to process faster because then one set of these various sets of miners would be working in parallel. But before you do that, you have to have a way to divide up everything in the blockchain so that you know this piece belongs here and that piece belongs there. And it's mathematically certain, and you know exactly. And everybody knows. So far, they have not figured out how to do that with Ethereum. Whereas with Accumulate, every identity manages everything under it. And so I know when I look at an identity, I can assign that identity to this set of our validators, and none of the other validators need to worry about it.
Right.
Um, I hope that is at
Yeah, yeah,
least
yeah. Yeah, totally, totally. So now this brings us towards the end of the session. So, Jay, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your incredible insights on Accumulate Network, the future of digital identity and asset management. Your expertise has given us a lot to think about and act upon. Any final words for our audience?
Well, I just wanted to thank the audience. Thank you for inviting us, and thank you, audience, for listening. I certainly encourage you to reach out to us, see our accumulaternetwork.io. Reach out to me if you've got questions or you're working on a project and you want to do more. You want to build some competitive advantages into your project over all the other thousands of projects out there. Reach out to us. We can help you do that.
Right, and we have a very vibrant developer community in India that is always ready to like opportunities that you have told about. So we hope to have you back soon, Jay, in season 2 of SecureDApp's exclusive. And a huge thank you to all of you, amazing audience, for tuning in and making this webinar so interactive. Your engagement drives us, our mission, our Secured App, to build a safer digital India. For all our viewers, if you found this conversation valuable, please remember to like this video and subscribe to the Secured Apps YouTube channel for more deep dives into the world of blockchain and Web3. Your engagement helps us bring more experts like Jay to us, and also mark your calendars for 10 days from now, that is 9th of September, 30th of August, same time, when we'll be back with another inspiring guest or guests and a new topic as well. You don't want to miss it. That's all for today. Stay safe online, keep exploring the Web3 and blockchain landscape, and we'll see you next week. On behalf of Secured App and Secured App Exclusive, this is your host, Karan, signing off. Take care.